They called him the Barefoot Bandit, but before the headlines and FBI posters, he was just a hungry, angry kid hiding in the woods. By the time Colton Harris-Moore turned 14, he was already a ghost in the system, breaking into home, stealing cars, disappearing into the forest before anyone could catch him. Over the next few years, he wouldn't just rob houses. He'd steal yachts, sports cars, even airplanes, despite never having taken a single flying lesson in his life. 67 crimes in total, assaulting police officers, stealing their guns, and staying one step ahead of law enforcement for years, moving from city to city, island to island, like a shadow they couldn't pin down. But Colton's story didn't begin with a chase. It began in a rusting trailer on Camano Island, off the coast of Washington State. His childhood was a storm of poverty, neglect, and addiction. His mother, consumed by alcohol, barely noticed him. His father, a drug user, vanished after the divorce, leaving Colton to fend for himself. Food was scarce. Love was non-existent. So, he stole to survive. At first, just a small thing, bread, milk, candy bars, swiped from the corner store. But he was sloppy and inexperienced. Each time he got caught, he'd end up in juvenile detention, a place that looked more like a guarded school than a prison. His mother never came to visit, never asked about him. And Colton learned early that if he wanted to survive, he'd have to do it on his own. By 14, his crimes escalated. He began breaking into vacation homes, carefully choosing houses whose owners were away. Inside, he'd raid the fridge, play video games, watch TV, even sleep in the beds, sometimes for days. If there was a car in the driveway, he'd take it for a joyride, clean it, and return it without a scratch. Except he always left with whatever cash, electronics, or frozen food he could carry. In his mind, he wasn't hurting anyone. Insurance will cover it, he told himself. No victims. Soon, Colton had no home at all, except the one he built deep in the woods. A battered tent became his base, following him from robbery to robbery. His loot piled up: cash, credit cards, stolen electronics, even gear from a fire station. A $6,000 set of military-grade night vision goggles and a thermal imaging camera, bought with stolen cards. Police reports began stacking up. Burglaries everywhere. They had his fingerprints from earlier arrests, his school absences, his mother's refusal to cooperate. But finding him on the sprawling island was another matter. By 15, the pressure closed in. Neighbors spotted him breaking into a house and called police. This time, he didn't make it out. He was caught and sent back to juvenile detention. And that's when something changed. Inside, Colton kept his head down. Read books, taught himself to draw, became obsessed with airplanes, sketching designs, memorizing diagrams, talking about going to college one day. His good behavior paid off. After 10 months, he was moved to a lower security facility. It was a mistake. Colton studied the guards' routines, waited for the right night, and simply slipped out a window. There was no fence, no alarm. By the time anyone noticed, he had vanished back into the forest. At 17, he returned to his old life, bolder than ever. He broke into hardware stores, cracked safes, and outran police in stolen sports cars. Once, he ditched a Mercedes in the woods after a high-speed chase, disappearing into the trees before officers could close in. Then he crossed a dangerous line, stealing an assault rifle from a police car. The manhunt intensified. Armed teams swept the island. Helicopters scanned the treetops. The FBI put a $10,000 bounty on his head. But Colton was already planning his most audacious move yet, something no one could have imagined. In his tent, hidden under a tarp, were aviation manuals and a laptop running Microsoft Flight Simulator. He'd been teaching himself to fly. studying the runways at the island's small airport, slipping into private planes when no one was looking, just to steal the manuals. He wasn't just hiding anymore, he was getting ready to take off. Colton's obsession with flight had gone from daydream to mission. Every stolen manual, every hour spent in a flight simulator was preparation for the moment he would finally step into a real cockpit. One night, under the cover of darkness, he cut the lock on a small island hangar. Inside, rows of private aircraft gleamed in the moonlight. He studied them like a jeweler appraising diamonds before picking his prize. With a mix of stolen knowledge and fearless instinct, Colton rolled the plane onto the runway, powered up the engine, and took off. The roar of the propeller gave way to an eerie silence as the island shrank beneath him. Clouds rushed past his windows. For a boy who had never even been a passenger on a plane, he flew with unnerving confidence, hugging altitudes under 18,000 feet to hide from radar, blending into airspace meant for helicopters and small craft. But the sky has no mercy for amateurs. His fuel gauge was sinking fast. The joy of flight was replaced with a cold calculation. He wasn't going to make it to an airport. He chose an open field, throttled down, and aimed for the ground. The landing was brutal, the plane skidding, tearing into the earth. But when the dust settled, Colton crawled from the wreckage with little more than cuts and bruises. Within minutes, he was gone, swallowed by the forest. Authorities were baffled. A stolen plane, a rough crash landing. They assumed drug traffickers. No one imagined a barefoot teenager could have pulled it off. But Colton wasn't done. Days later, on a neighboring Washington island, he stole another plane, this time landing it smoothly. He robbed stores, cracked open an ATM with a stolen forklift, and left a trail of fingerprints and security footage. The police now had no doubt. The mad boy they'd been chasing for years was flying airplanes, and the public was fascinated. Fans nicknamed him the Barefoot Bandit, inspired by his habit of committing robberies without shoes. Graffiti popped up in his honor. Songs, fan pages, even T-shirts carried his name. Colton leaned into the legend, once leaving a row of painted footprints across a supermarket floor like a signature. When police pressure on the island grew, he switched tactics. Stealing a boat, he slipped across the maritime border into Canada without the Coast Guard noticing. After weeks of laying low, he stole another boat and returned to the U.S., resuming his car thefts, swapping vehicles before they needed gas to avoid surveillance at fueling stations. His targets became more ambitious: a Mercedes, a sports car, then another airplane from a small Idaho airport. This flight ended in Granite Falls, Washington, but the landing site was littered with tree stumps, damaging the plane. Witnesses saw the crash, and soon helicopters, FBI agents, and armed search teams were swarming the area. Colton fled into the woods, leaving behind a bag stuffed with $20,000 in cash and a camera full of selfies, trophies for investigators to marvel at. Still, he slipped away again. Another stolen plane, another flawless landing on yet another Washington island. Then silence. For months, nothing. Some fans even believed he was dead, until a giant footprint appeared at a harbor and a boat went missing. From there, Colton's trail became a zigzag across the Pacific Northwest. He stole boats, returned to his home island, then bolted for the mainland. Once, he even dropped $100 at an animal shelter with a note. "Please use this for animal care. Colton, the Barefoot Bandit." He expanded his reach beyond Washington, drifting from state to state, stealing cars, breaking into rural airports, and scouting for the perfect plane. After 9 states, 3,200 kilometers, and 11 stolen vehicles, he found it, in Bloomington, Indiana. He camped in the woods for days, watching the airport, waiting for the right moment. Then he struck. The takeoff was smooth, the heading deliberate. His destination, the Bahamas. When locals saw a small plane circling above an unmarked stretch of shoreline, they had no idea the pilot was a 19-year-old fugitive. Colton dropped the aircraft onto the muddy flats, climbed out, and vanished into the tropical forest. Within hours, Bahamian police were alerted by U.S. authorities. The Barefoot Bandit had crossed an international border. Colton wasted no time. He robbed a store, hit a restaurant for cash and supplies, and lived like it was a beach vacation, swimming in turquoise water, exploring hidden coves. When he spotted an unattended boat at the harbor, he tailed its owner to a restaurant, broke into his car, snatched the keys, and was gone before the man even finished his meal. The boat carried him to the quiet island of Eleuthera, where he hid for a week. But Colton couldn't resist showing off. One day, as two young men stood on a pier, he began making daring maneuvers in the boat, spinning and weaving as if performing a stunt show, a white teenager flaunting his skills in waters where everyone knew his face was on wanted posters. The night was thick with salt air when Colton eased his stolen boat toward the pier. He called out casually, almost playfully, "You don't know me. I'm Colton, the Barefoot Bandit." One man on the dock froze. He did know him, and he knew about the $10,000 reward. But he played dumb, masking his recognition behind a poker face. His plan? Lure Colton in. Colton smirked, eyes narrowing. "Don't pretend. Call the cops. Let's see if they can catch me. I could use a little fun." The confidence, no, the audacity, of that line would stick with them for years. While the first man stalled, the second slipped out his phone, whispering to a friend with a boat. Colton spotted the call instantly. His eyes sharpened. Without another word, he cranked the throttle and veered away, that sly grin still fixed on his face. Moments later, the friend arrived, not alone, but with a crew. 6 men in total, they launched into pursuit. Colton didn't run. He stood on his deck defiant, daring them to come closer. One man drew a gun. Colton reacted in a flash, swinging the boat across their bow, kicking up a wave that drenched them head to toe. The driver wiped salt water from his eyes, disoriented, and veered off course. By the time they recovered, Colton was gone. He raced toward a nearby harbor, a sprawling waterfront estate looming behind it like a palace. A uniformed security guard watched from afar, frowning at the strange sight. One lone boy being hunted by a boatload of shouting men. The guard raised a hand to signal him to slow. Colton didn't. He slammed the boat into the dock, leapt off, and sprinted past in a blur. "They're trying to kill me," he gasped, before vanishing into the manicured shrubs. The guard gave chase, close enough to see Colton's outline duck into the greenery. Then he grabbed his radio. "I've got the kid from the news. He's in the garden." Within minutes, the area swarmed with police. Colton was boxed in, no open route to escape. But the Barefoot Bandit had made a career out of impossible getaways. Slipping low through the bushes, he looped behind the harbor. Silent as the tide, he slid into the water, swimming to a nearby boat. Above, the search continued. Below, Colton climbed aboard, fired the engine, just a soft hum, and drifted away unnoticed. Then, without warning, he gunned it. The boat roared to life. Heads snapped toward the sound. Shouts rang out. But the police boats weren't there yet, only civilians offering theirs for the chase. Even with fresh pursuit behind him, Colton had distance. He kept glancing back to measure their gain, until a pale stretch of sand appeared too late. The hole struck, grinding to a halt. Engines revved. Propellers churned against the grit. Nothing. The police closed in, weapons drawn. Then, an unexpected twist. Colton raised a gun, pointed it at his own head. "It's impossible to go back," he shouted, voice cracking with something between defiance and desperation. With his free hand, he fought to free the boat. Suddenly, he spun the wheel, slammed the throttle, and miraculously the boat lurched free. Gunfire cracked. The police weren't aiming for him. They were aiming for the engine. A round tore through the casing. The boat shuddered and died. Colton dropped the gun, raised his hands. "I surrender! I surrender!" And just like that, after 2.5 years on the run, the Barefoot Bandit was caught. The Bahamian police brought him ashore, the crowd surging in to snap photos. He tried to shield his face, but there was no hiding now. They had done what U.S. police, the FBI, and even special forces hadn't. The charges in the Bahamas. Surprisingly light, just a $300 fine for illegal entry. But they weren't keeping him. The U.S. wanted him back. By 2010, now 19, Colton faced 67 charges across 3 countries. Decades in prison loomed. His lawyer, the legendary John Henry Brown, known for defending Ted Bundy, took a bold approach. Have Colton plead guilty to everything. Then make the court see the boy behind the crimes, the neglected, abused child who learned to survive on his own. The judge listened. 7 years. Colton served 5. Released at 25, he found work in his lawyer's own office. In interviews, he spoke of his hatred for the person he used to be and his determination to rebuild. From barefoot fugitive to convicted felon, and now, a man trying to leave the past in the wake behind him. He stole cars, planes, and headlines. But in the end, the greatest thing Colton Harris-Moore stole was time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel.